Welcome to another episode of The Brand Called You, a podcast and podcast show that brings you leadership lessons, knowledge, experience, and wisdom from thousands of successful individuals from around the world. I'm your host, Ashutosh Garg, and today I'm delighted to welcome a very, very accomplished professional athlete turned business owner from North Carolina, USA, Mr. Brandon Cullen. Brandon, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
Brandon is the Chief Concept Officer of MADabolic. As I mentioned, he's a professional athlete turned business owner, and he's the host of an entrepreneurial-inspired podcast, Playing Guilty. So, Brandon, let's talk about MADabolic. Before I get into any questions, tell me a little bit about your own journey and MADabolic.
Yeah, so I know you mentioned the hockey career, or I guess the professional athlete career. It was hockey. It's the fun thing, I guess, to talk about or to relate back to. But my partner and I have actually been doing this now longer than we did that hockey thing. So one of the things we always mention is fitness was kind of a big part of that professional career. I think we're kind of just average players that excelled based on fitness. So MADabolic being a fitness concept, it made it was at least logical to give it a go. And we've been doing it, to be honest now, we've been doing it late 2000s. So we're coming up on 15 years on being in this field for sure.
Wow. And how do you define strength-driven interval training?
Yeah, so that's a good one. It actually is exactly what it sounds like. Strength is the base or the foundation of the program or of our workouts. And the interval training, not only is interval training great to create an athletic profile, but when you apply it to kind of group fitness and organization, we like to look at interval training as the structure. So strength being our base, intervals being the structure that brings it all together.
Very interesting. And how is this different than what is offered in so many fitness boutiques all over the world?
Yeah, it's a crowded space, right? On paper, and from the uneducated eye, it's a very crowded space. But I can tell you this strength-driven approach is somewhat foreign in boutique fitness. There's a lot of people's the wrong word. There are a lot of concepts that do their best to look like a strength-driven program from their website, from their advertising, from their messaging, all that stuff. But if you were to really look at the boutique fitness industry, it's a much more cardio-driven, it's a much more cardio-driven weight loss approach, as opposed to a thriving through life with a strong, let's just use it like a strong foundation to allow you to thrive.
Wonderful. And what is the biggest thing lacking in the fitness industry today?
Well, I think it's what we are trying to fill and what we've been trying to do for over a decade. Now, I'm happy where the industry is headed right now. I think a couple things happened during COVID. It was somewhat of an accelerant to a lot of disruptive thinking. I think the world has opened up to recovery. We started thinking about the way we want to live and the way we want to age, and I think that helped with our runway right now. So I love the way that the industry is going, but I will say programming or creating workouts is probably the easy word to use. Creating workout programs for everyday people that comes from a strength bias, it's very different. And I think I think people may try, but it's going to be tough to catch us, I think, at this point, because I do think we are doing some very creative and disruptive things in the industry right now.
Fabulous. And when you talk about the MADabolic brand, how are you distinguishing yourself in such a crowded marketplace, other than, of course, what you spoke about, which is strength-driven interval training?
Yeah, so our voice is loud. We're not shy to stand out or to try to stand out. And it's interesting that when you're smaller and when you're trying to gain momentum, you somewhat have to make some noise to get noticed. And I find a lot of companies that we look up to, you forget about kind of the trailblazing background they came from to now put them in a position to be a lot more measured with things. So I think, you know, right now with some huge players in the game, sometimes people think our tone might be confrontational, but you know, it's sad that confrontational is actually bringing a little bit of truth to the industry. So, you know, it's a tough question to answer. Now, do I think we offer something unique? Yes. But I'm always one to say that the best workout program is the one that you do. And if that is a simple walk 5 days a week, if that's strength training with us, if that's yoga, if that's cycling, whatever gets you moving often is still the best training program.
What a great response. And I'm sure my viewers and listeners will love this comment. Talk to me also when you talk branding, what is the difference between a shotgun and a rifle approach to branding?
Yeah, so that's the other thing too. If your company is based off of everybody is welcome, very, very inclusive and approachable message, which, by the way, from a human level, I think it's fantastic. I grew up in Canada, so I always make the joke. I'm like the biggest oxymoron in the world. I'm a Canadian born American small business owner. It's like this hilarious collide. But I get why the shotgun approach opens you up to more potential consumers. But it also has a lot of voices in that conversation, and it has a lot of personalities that you need to consider. And if that's your approach, you have to listen to a lot of voices. And I think more of that kind of, what was the one? Was it a rifle approach? Was the other one?
Rifle and the shotgun.
So yeah, I find it a lot easier to target 25 to 50-year-old highly dedicated individuals that value strength, structure, accountability, and professionalism, even though I know that market is smaller when you look at middle North America or just the world in general. I do find it's a very easy consumer to chase.
And yet, you know, Brandon, most people are very now conscious of fitness. I think the pandemic has got more and more people aware of fitness than people used to be. How does one determine what is the right fitness regime for me?
Yeah, that's tough. That was one of my biggest issues when I first got into the strength and conditioning world. You had workout programs that an Olympic athlete was using that was being suggested to an everyday person.
Correct.
So, you know, I can make a pretty biased opinion on how approachable we are, but also you have a lot of factors with like history of injury, natural ability, how sedentary that person has been for the years leading up to them coming in. So, you know, unfortunately, I can't diagnose what everybody's training program should be. But I think let me make this statement. If you are starting out, start small again, and go back to finding something you enjoy. Because if you hate, I could have the best workout program in the world, but if you hate coming in and you hate what we're offering, if it's not enjoyable to you, I mean, it's not going to have a long runway. So I think if you're looking to start, find something you like, find something that gets you moving 5 days a week, and reevaluate from there.
You know, on a lighter note, Mark Twain said, every time I feel like exercising, I lie down till the feeling passes.
That's good.
So moving on, you know, when I was reading about you, you say that about 25% of people in the US do not exercise. How do you reach a lot of these?
Man, it's such a loaded, this is a big debate in the United States, particularly right now. You have one group of people that says that 75% of people are a lost cause.
Right.
And we should be focusing on the youth coming up, developing habits. So once they age, they have those healthy habits. And that goes as far as like what activity levels look like at school, how often they're taking phys ed, how many recesses they have a day, just how much motion we can get them into. And then the other half looks at, we have almost like a lost population that we haven't taken care of. And how do you reach them? And you know what? I think I could sit here and argue both sides of that coin. If we don't do something as our population ages, you know, we're gonna be into some issues with medical access here in the United States, and just taking care of that aging population. But if you were to ask me where my passion lies, I would like to educate the youth and develop the habits there. I am not saying that the aging population is a lost cause, but I do think there are so many economic factors and so many things. It's not as simple as, hey, you know, let's get everyone over 50 moving more. There's a lot that goes into that. And if I had the choice and I had the bandwidth and energy where to put my effort, it would be to the youth.
Well said.
Yeah.
And that's a great segue to my next question, that how are the millennials and the Gen Zs and the people younger changing fitness and wellness?
It's kind of wild because Gen Zs are operating much different than millennials. Okay. I want to make sure I don't kind of like speak to this in an ignorant way, because it's not like I'm studying these population. I can only talk about what is coming into my doors. And from what I am seeing, the Gen Z consumer, they seem to be a much more self-educated. They do their research and come in almost like knowing what they want and expect out of a program. And I think the millennial generation, we've been able to leverage kind of like pop culture to social media to almost like drive them in through a like urgency, wanting to keeping up with the Joneses. So it's a very different population where, you know, millennials, it's very much social. They're very social for them. And Gen Z seems to be a little bit more measured. They know what they want. I hope that answers your question.
It's a phenomenal response. You know, I've asked this question about millennials and Gen Zs from at least 700-800 people I have spoken to. And I think you differentiated it brilliantly. Thank you. That's a great response. Let me move on now, Brandon. Tell me about your team at MADabolic.
Yeah, it's been awesome. We've really evolved in the last 3 years specifically. My partner and I started this company in 2011. And we kind of had, well, once we got going, we kind of had two ideas of what this could look like. The two of us probably thought we could get to 20 units on our own through franchising. And there's a lot behind, you know, the engine of what a franchise is. So we were happy with that. And then the other option was, at some point we'd sit in the right room one day with the right strategic partnerships to go for a bigger level of scale. And let's just, for a multiple of 10, let's say that's 200 units versus the 20 we thought we could accomplish. And about 3 years ago, we partnered with a company named Z Growth Partners. Now we are a single entity that is chasing those 200 locations. And we got a team of about 15 or 20 behind the machine now, which it's really cool. I get to sit in this very unique position and almost like look back at what we didn't provide as two people in comparison to what we do provide as a team of 20 now. I mean, it's a well-oiled machine, and I can truthfully say that I love going to work with my teammates every day. They're good people. They work their butts off, and we're all chasing that same goal. So I'm a huge fan of my team.
So one more question on MADabolic, and then we'll move to your podcast. You also have a very delicate balance and a relationship between a franchisor and a franchisee. Tell me a little bit about how you manage this.
Honestly, I've never been great at it personally. I think people closest to me would say that, let me start this. I think people not super close to me on a personal level would say, you know, Brandon's very black and white and at times can be harsh. And I think that same close friend of mine would say, Brandon's very black and white and at times can be harsh, but he's also one of the most loyal people to his friends and people on his team. So the most delicate balance that I struggle with is a franchisee, and I get why this is, they typically are thinking about their team, their location, their unit, their market. And I get that. It's it's a huge investment, and it's an emotional challenge being an entrepreneur for the first time and all that stuff. And at times, naturally they think, well, things are different in my market, and you know, no one's paying enough focus to me, and I can promise it's not the case. We have to make a lot of difficult decisions that keep the system in place. And probably the hardest thing is, you'll have, someone once told me, and I think this is a great kind of analogy, is you're going to have 20% of franchisees that overachieve, 60% will do great, and 20% will just be kind of like average. Right. And usually when you have to say no, it's not to the lower performing franchisees, it's your great franchisees that you would want to give like more rope and more freedom to, but in order to not be subjective and to run a consistent strategy and to be fair to everybody, you often have to say no to your best franchisees to make sure that the underperforming ones understand that we're treating the system in one way. So, you know, I've always thought, I think the quality I love the most in other founders or owners or managers is that ability to manage people. I've always found that a struggle. Like I think one way, and it helps me for driving forward, but oftentimes it can be hard on relationships. It's just and it's a quality I've tried to continually work on over this last 10 years, for sure.
What a great response. Thank you. So, Brandon, I have time for two more questions. Let me ask you about your podcast, Playing Guilty.
Yeah.
Tell me a little bit about your podcast.
Well, it started as a passion project because, well, it still is. We were at our annual meetings with that entire team I was telling you about. And when we started quantifying our best leads, we noticed they all came from speaking engagements.
Okay.
Well, not all, but a huge percentage of them came from when we were at a conference, or I was delivering a keynote, or I landed on a podcast. And what I believe, especially because we do have a more direct tone, I think when people get to hear the voice and the person and the persons behind the brand, I think it helps humanize us a lot more. So the podcast kind of gave me that ability to talk to other entrepreneurs and to have more of a human behind who people might think we are or I am. And the second side of things, from a selfish component, is when you go to scale, things have to, as you grow out and go to scale, things somewhat have to tighten. And not in a gross, like, cookie cutter way, but you have to run things in an efficient way.
Correct.
And what I found is some of that startup building creativity kind of thing that drives me, that this gave me a something to do. It was something to be passionate about, something different, something to challenge me with. So there's a lot of, I think there's a lot of value that comes out of it. But for me, it allows me to talk to some really great people and give me a different perspective on exactly what we're trying to do as young entrepreneurs.
Wonderful. And my last question to you, Brandon, and this is for the many people who will listen to our conversation. Based on your amazing journey as a sportsman, as a hockey player, as an entrepreneur, now rolling out or building out 200 stores, what would you say are 3 lessons you would want our viewers and listeners to take away?
3 lessons? It's funny. I'm at a point right now where I find like we're all tiptoeing around a little bit to this new way of thinking. And you can quantify it to the kind of work from home, work in the office argument, I need more balance in life, which I get it. Taking time to recover, like taking your vacations, like all of this stuff, in my opinion, holistically is beautiful. Like I get it on a human level. My only issue for me is everything great that has come within my life, whether it be sports or business now, it's come from the grind. It's come from the opposite of balance. And I'm kind of at this weird divide where, I love reading business books and productivity books and all that stuff, and how to hack life books, right? But I always find, like, a lot of times someone writes the book about all this balance, but they leave out all the chapters of the grind that allowed them to write the book about balance. And so what I'm torn with is I get all arguments. I understand why some people feel more productive working from home, and why some CEOs want to see their people in the office. But whatever it is, I've found that most of my progress has happened when no one's looking. sometimes after hours, and sometimes, you know, bordering lines of crazy work ethic versus balance. So I don't have a simple answer, and you can tell I'm in my head. I'm a little challenged with knowing what is the right answer.
But I think you've articulated the dilemma of a fabulous work-life balance versus working incredibly hard, incredibly long hours to reach a stage where you want to be. So it's a very common dilemma, and thank you so much for sharing it.
Thank you.
Brandon, thank you so much for speaking to me. Thank you for talking to me about MADabolic, about your amazing journey. Thank you for talking to me about your team and franchising and then the franchisee-franchisor relationship. And thank you for also sharing with me your own deep thoughts about some of the lessons my viewers and listeners can take away. And I think this dilemma of when do I suddenly say I'm going to hang up my boots and bring in that famous work-life balance in my life. And I'm 65 and I still struggle with it. So I completely understand that. Thank you for speaking to me, and good luck to you.
Well, thanks a lot. I really appreciated kind of a different line of questioning too, because it just got me to be able to speak openly and think a little bit differently. So yeah, I really appreciate your time today.
Thank you. Thank you for listening to the Brand Called You videocast and podcast, a platform that brings you knowledge, experience, and wisdom of hundreds of successful individuals from around the world. Do visit our website www.tbcy.in to watch and listen to the stories of many more individuals. You can also follow us on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Just search for the Brand Called You.